Welcome to the information session for the Master of Science in Systems Engineering at California State University, Dominguez Hills. My name is Keith Otterberg, and I'm the Marketing Director for the College of Continuing and Professional Education at CSUDH. I'll be your host for today. Welcome. Feel free to review our program information on our website at csudh.edu/MSSE and download the information kit for details about the program and additional resources covered in the webinar. That address is bit.ly/CSUDH-MSSE-info kit, one word. So to get started, let's take a look at our session's agenda. We'll begin by meeting the curriculum developer, program coordinator, and lead faculty, Dr. Antonia Boadi, who will provide an overview of systems engineering and introduce you to the program via an overview of benefits, expectations, and course details. Then we'll go over the application process and how to get started. And now to lead off our session, I'll turn this over to Dr. Boadi. Tony, take it away.
Hi, I'm Antonia Boadi, the program director. I'm really excited that you're able to join us today, and I'd like to share a bit about our curriculum. Cal State Dominguez Hills is a member of COSE, which is an acronym that stands for the International Council of Systems Engineering. It is the premier professional society which is devoted to the promotion, application, and enhancement of systems engineering. We are a member of both the Corporate Advisory Board and, most importantly, the Academic Council. The Academic Council facilitates the discussion and exploration of issues relevant to academia and establishes a path for achievement with strategic collaborations within COSE. The members of the Academic Council offer bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees in systems engineering. And this is a really important relationship because it ensures that our curriculum reflects the latest development in the body of knowledge related to systems engineering. Now, you may ask yourself, as many people do, what is systems engineering? Well, systems engineering provides the tools, techniques, methods, knowledge, standards, principles, and concepts that enable the realization of successful systems. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Well, you can think of systems engineering as the glue that ensures that a product or system developed by diverse teams, companies, and agencies, that system performs as intended. Now, in COSE's definition of systems engineering is that systems engineering is an interdisciplinary approach and means to enable the realization of successful systems. It focuses on defining customer needs and required functionality early in the development cycle by documenting requirements, then proceeding with design synthesis and system validation while considering the problem holistically. And so it's really important to note that especially important in the process is the proper specification of requirements. We want to talk about requirement verification and validation throughout the system lifecycle. So we're concerned with operations, cost and schedule, test and performance, training, manufacturing, all the way through the disposal or retirement of a system. And as you'll see later in the presentation, each of these activities is critical to the success and development of complex systems. Well, what happens when the projects don't follow a well-defined systems engineering discipline? Well, we end up with poor requirement management, integration problems, the design may be inadequate or flawed, heightened levels of risk, cost overruns, schedule slippages, quality issues, as well as limited or imperfect traceability. Now we'll briefly discuss a handful of case studies that illustrate the need for a sound systems engineering practice. So there's some case studies that have been documented and described in detail in a paper on famous failures. And I provide here the citation of that paper. And if you look at the different case studies that are described in the paper, not all of them are necessarily engineering failures. So you see New Coke, which is probably so long ago, many of you watching not aware of it, which is exactly what we want to illustrate. It was not successful. IBM PC Junior, the General Electric rotary compressor refrigerator, the Titanic, the Edsel, which was, an automobile, the A-12 airplane, the Concorde, which we'll talk a bit about, some related to the space industry, Motorola Iridium system, Apollo 13, Space Shuttle Challenger. In fact, there were 2 space shuttle disasters that related to weaknesses in the application of systems engineering principles, the Hubble Space Telescope, Lewis spacecraft, and so forth. Again, systems engineering can be applied to the overall planning for conflicts or wars, the war in Vietnam, Bosnia mission, the Ariane 5 missile, the September 11th attack on the World Trade Center. We have the Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster, the Northeast power outage, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. These case studies represent situations that would have benefited from systems engineering. And again, I want to emphasize that they're not all engineering projects. Nevertheless, the application of systems engineering tools and methodologies could have improved the outcomes. Now, this table summarizes systems engineering tasks that were not performed on the projects listed. And you may recall from the NCOSE definition of systems engineering, remember that key task involved requirements development, validation, verification, and so forth. So when you look at these, the paper describes these various case studies. So you can see in the last 3 columns, RD stands for requirement definition. And so you can see whether requirement definition, verification, and validation representing distinct tasks, whether they were performed well. And you notice that each of these case studies were deficient in one or more areas. And just to illustrate, we will provide a brief overview of 3 of the case studies: the Concorde, Space Shuttle Columbia, and the collapse of the Hyatt Regency walkway. Now, in 2000, in Concorde, en route to New York, crashed shortly after takeoff near Paris. This devastating accident claimed the lives of all 109 passengers and crew on board, along with 4 individuals on the ground. Investigators attributed this horrific accident to foreign object debris, which is FOD. So earlier, a Continental Airlines DC-10 had taken off about 5 minutes prior, leaving behind a strip of perforated metal from one of its engines. Well, that caused a problem because soon after takeoff, a tire on the left main landing gear burst. This triggered a complex reaction, which resulted in the rupture of the left wing fuel tank, the ignition of escaping fuel, and the partial and complete loss of the left engines, as well as damage to the landing gear, retraction mechanism, and deterioration of the wing and control surface structures. And the main problem is that this aircraft was designed for speed, but it could not accelerate or climb in response to this sequence of incidents. In February 2003, the Space Shuttle Columbia broke up, killing 7 astronauts on board. An investigation board determined that a large piece of foam fell from the shuttle's external tank and breached the spacecraft wing. This incident led to the retirement of the entire space shuttle fleet in 2011. The last case study has to do with the 1981 collapse of the walkway in the Hyatt Regency Hotel. So 2 overhead walkways in the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Kansas City, Missouri, collapsed in July 1981, killing 114 people and injuring an additional 216. There were concrete and glass platforms that floated above the lobby, and they function as kind of a marquee feature for this 40-story hotel. And this was a key feature, point of pride of this design. But unfortunately, they were also what led to the collapse of the walkway. Investigators determined that a minor design change contributed to this disaster. The elevated walkways were held up with rods connected to the atrium roof, but the second floor walkway was connected to the fourth floor walkway, not to the roof. This meant that the fourth floor walkway was subjected to twice the intended load. And so it turned out that the underlying issues for this failure were, number one, an inadequate design verification process. Secondly, lack of accountability and oversight. And lastly, and very most importantly, I would say, poor communication between the design team and the construction team contractors. So you may ask yourself, what do systems engineers do? Well, depends on which industry they work in, because systems engineering has applicability in virtually every domain and industry. So a systems engineer's duties vary upon the industry that he or she works in, as well as the particular area or team that they support. Systems engineers approach problems by considering the system as a whole, including its components, interactions, and the environment in which it operates. This holistic perspective helps in understanding system behavior and identifying potential interactions and dependencies. Well, a systems engineer is one job, but many skills. A systems engineer must be a leader, a team player, and an extraordinary communicator. This individual directs the technical program and must ensure that individuals contribute to the overall goals. In other words, that person has to make sure that they obtain buy-in from all entities and groups. There can't be competition. There can't be a need to be right. The systems engineer team leader, as well as the members, they have to be humble. They can't be too proud to ask questions, because the unasked questions are oftentimes sources of design weaknesses or assumptions. And so you want to make sure that all these assumptions are identified from the beginning. That a systems engineer has to be a generalist. And these are key skills that we teach in our curriculum. That person has to be able to construct a system architecture and identify the key enabling technologies, as well as to be able to quantify and articulate the advantages as well as the negative aspects of various approaches. That person has to be able to critique and inspire all engineering specialists. So there may be a person who is a specialist in batteries and someone who's a specialist in radar. And so that the systems engineer has to make sure that those people are able to communicate important information about the interactions between their various systems, as well as any assumptions that are made. That person has to be able to respond and rethink in response to new developments or problems. That person should be the expert in one or more key areas of the project, has to be a business person, so it needs to be able to provide good budget management as well as trade-offs between budget and schedule. That person has to be willing to delegate and organize, and has to be willing to allow others to make subordinate decisions. In other words, that person is a team catalyst, a people multiplier, and a person with this unique confluence of skills can expect to be in high demand for this combination of skills. Now, we know is that there are challenges to the acceptance and implementation of systems engineering practices. And some of the resistance manifests itself as the customer may be distant, not well understood, or unsure. So in other words, you might have a person who may not have expertise or subject matter expertise in a particular area. However, overall, the customer knows what the end product should achieve, what its requirements are. And just because that person may not be able to articulate the needs in the language of an engineer, there still needs to be an ability to understand and provide the tools that allow them to articulate and communicate what they want early in the design process. You don't want to wait until the end, because the later that disconnects or problems are discovered, the more expensive that they are to repair and the greater the impact to the schedule. Another problem could be lack of teamwork. The executive and program manager may communicate the fact that funding is unstable. There's also the perception that systems engineering increases cost or introduces the involvement of an outside reviewer, sometimes viewed as a spy. And so some teams may be reluctant to share vulnerabilities, that their component does not perform as well as required. And so there may be a need to, or a perception that there's a need to camouflage these weaknesses instead of working together toward a common goal, instead of pitting different organizations against each other. Some dysfunctions have to do with what is needed versus what is wanted, a requirement versus a desire. And when you articulate this in terms of requirements, very specific language is used. A need or requirement is specified in terms of using the language of shall, whereas a will, what is wanted, is articulated using will, that particular term. There may be confusion about the system boundary. What part of the design is your particular group responsible for? What's the overall system, particularly for a complex system in which there are many players? It's very important to define that boundary. There may be poor fidelity of the technical scope within the allocated budget and schedule, and there also may be a lack of leadership. And that's where you, as a systems engineer, step in. Systems engineers have to be prepared to lead. So let's talk a bit about our program overview. It's a 24-month program, and when we say 24 months, this is 24 consecutive months. So you go 6 consecutive terms: fall, spring, summer, fall, spring, summer. Our courses are offered online asynchronously, which means that instead of coming to lecture or even turning on logging into a Zoom session Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m., all of the content for a particular week is uploaded into the class portal on a weekly basis. So you'll have the lecture notes, you'll have the recording and so forth, as well as the assignments and supplementary information. It's all available for you to review at a time that's appropriate, that works for you. And this is really important for working professionals. There may be evenings where you may work late several days in a row and you may only have Saturday morning, and that's fine. And that's the advantage of an asynchronous online program. But at the same time, you have the benefit of being able to interact directly with your other members of your cohort or your instructor during weekly office hours. They're not mandatory, but if someone has questions, they can connect, and it creates kind of a sense of community. Now, this is a cohort-based model, meaning that everyone who begins this fall will take the same courses in sequence each semester. So if you work on a team with someone and you establish a good bond and your schedules are synergistic, that means that you can continue to work together, if you like, throughout the program. Now, not all of the courses or assignments are team-based, but at the same time, at least you'll have someone you can talk to and say, well, I'm working on this problem and I'm kind of stuck, what do you recommend? So it's not as if you're isolated. And in this cohort, we have a student who's in Japan, and that student still has connections with other members of the cohort. Another thing to note is that our curriculum is designed to mimic industry practices. And also, all of our students are fully employed. Our curriculum mimics the process employed in industry for developing systems. Student teams collaborate to develop a system of their choice, and sometimes there's a system assigned to everyone in the cohort. It just depends on the particular direction taken during a semester. They document system performance and a requirement specification, and they continue defining the interfaces, modeling, performing verification, and so forth. Let me walk you through that. So the fall semester, you'll take 2 courses, and you'll take 2 courses each semester until your last term when you're working on your thesis project. But the first semester, you're given an overview of what systems engineering is. That's in your 510 course. Your 500 course is called the practice of systems engineering. And so you become acquainted with the handbook generated by NCOSE. They have a systems engineering handbook. They have an overview of systems engineering body of knowledge. So this gives you an idea what types of problems have systems engineering tools been applied to. You learn a lot more about case studies. So you got to have your arms around, okay, I have a now broad idea as to what systems engineering is. In the second semester, you continue with your introduction to systems engineering 2, that's the second course. It's a continuation of the 510 course, and then in the 530 course, quantitative methods. So for instance, in the 510 course, we may have you consider a problem. For example, you want to design a quadcopter for performing surveillance over a field or the airport or some area of interest. And so you come up with requirements for the first semester. And then as you continue in 550, we kind of have a thread that pulls throughout the semester, throughout the curriculum, actually. So you may refine in 515, you may refine that design. You may quantify the requirements. You may come up with requirements for the types of sensors that are required on that quadcopter, the battery life, and so forth. And so you would then, instead of just having requirements written on paper and pencil, you may learn to input them into a particular database or requirement repository. In 530, you learn some risk analysis tools, fault tree analysis, different methodologies for analyzing system. Third semester, you learn modeling and simulation, as well as model-based systems engineering, which sound very similar, but they're actually different. So for instance, in 550, modeling and simulation, we teach you discrete event simulation, probably agent-based modeling, as well as some dynamic or some other type of simulation. So these are our individual standalone modeling tools. 560 teaches you to input individual models into a larger repository so that you can determine if you make a change in one area of the model, how it ripples through and affects other areas. It's a lot more complicated, but that's kind of the difference between the two, the model-based and the modeling and simulation. And also the request that we receive now from employers is they want someone who knows MBSE or model-based systems engineering. That's the paradigm, the ascendant paradigm for right now in systems engineering. The fourth semester, analytics and systems engineering is not limited to the type of analytics that you're used to. We're concerned with, let's say, the implementation of end-to-end analytics, let's say in law enforcement. What kind of patterns will be, if we were to model that or develop a specification, let's say for Homeland Security or some type of law enforcement application, how would we use GIS types of analytics? what tools are required, or we could consider the model-based representation of a particular system and try to identify metrics or analytics that determine the quality of that overall system definition. The 540 course, Economic Factors and Systems Engineering, it's important for you to understand how your design decisions impact overall budget issues. In your 5th semester, which is your final semester in terms of the core coursework, you have complex systems architecture. So earlier in the curriculum, you learned to define requirements and so forth, but how do you go from maybe a 1-paragraph description of a system to the allocation of various function and requirements to hardware and software, or let's see, if we're talking about the quadcopter, the allocation to various sensors. And 580 has to do with systems of systems engineering. So currently, particularly, in our area in the defense industry, when a new system is proposed, instead of building it from scratch, you may develop that system as a combination of existing or legacy systems. And so how do you do that, quote unquote, optimally? And so in previous semesters or years, students have looked at modifications to the energy grid in the United States. That's an example of a system of systems, and ways to optimize that. How do you optimize the architecture? And there are particular attributes for a good architecture. And so out of a trade space of, let's say, 1,000 possibilities, how do you arrive upon the quote unquote best? And then lastly, during the summer, you define your master's, whatever your master's project will be. And so you've had 5 semesters to study various problems having to do with systems engineering, and you'll choose something that interests you. Now, student teams sometimes collaborate to develop a system of their choice. Others they have to do with the assignments are modeled after industry practices, and then students build upon those to develop their final project. Now, this is a practitioner's degree. It was really important to us in the development of this curriculum that students were not assigned, quote unquote, toy projects. That's one of the reasons that we're really proud of our relationship with NCOSE. Students develop artifacts or projects or assignments that are based upon industry templates for specification and design reviews. So our assignments mimic industry conditions. We do not give examinations or midterms or final exams, because again, in the industry, when you develop something, your team produces a product, they don't tell you to put your books away and sit in a room with pencil and paper. No, you're going to refer to other projects that you've worked on before. You're going to refer to books, and you're going to collaborate and discuss this. So that's why some of the projects are team-based and some you complete as an individual. Now, what we call these assignments, we refer to them as engineering design challenges. And typically they're 2 per semester. One maybe at the 6-week point, and then one due the last week of the semester. And we also provide opportunities for students to obtain professional certifications. And we'll talk about your desires and interests once you join our program. So in addition to the skills and knowledge developed as part of the coursework, you have the option to pursue these certifications that further enhance your professional portfolio. These are optional. And again, we'll discuss what interests you, and our goal is to integrate those into your culminating project or your thesis. You may ask yourself, what kind of projects will I work on? Well, our curriculum has been designed for learners at every stage of their professional development. Recent graduates, mid-career professionals, as well as seasoned professionals. Learners with less professional experience sometimes wonder where they'll be able to successfully complete a project. So this year we chose a specific theme related to a real-world project having to do with providing smart city infrastructure to a tiny house community. This shelter program provides 500 square foot modular units for unhoused adults. Our students applied systems engineering methodologies and tools learned in their coursework to the development of infrastructure that supports tiny home communities. I want to say that students are not required to select a project related to whatever the annual theme is. So in this particular project, they worked, some of the theses were related to the provision of intelligent transportation systems, drone facilitated security, overall infrastructure related to tiny house communities, mobile health care, virtual entertainment and fitness, real estate and property management, as well as smart homes. Now, some students chose to adapt work assignments to service their thesis projects. They've engaged their colleagues and managers by inviting them to serve on their thesis committees with the ultimate goal of gaining visibility and demonstrating their preparation for a promotion. I know this to be true. There's a student right now who's up for promotion as the systems architect for a very large firm in the space industry. So here is one sample project. It had to do with smart city drone facilitated security. And I want to talk a bit about how the student would apply what they've learned in their curriculum over the past several semesters and to their capstone, their culminating experience. So first of all, what had to be done was they had to apply artificial intelligence to mimic swarming behavior, and swarming behavior exhibited in biological systems such as birds, insects, and fish. So if you ever looked in the sky and saw a swarm of birds, you noticed how they instinctively follow each other and kind of form in a V formation. And when they disperse, it's as if there's one person kind of manipulating or acting as a puppeteer. And you wonder, how does this happen? Well, there are ways to imitate that type of behavior using principles from artificial intelligence. So the first thing is the application of these tools. Secondly, you have to model them. So students would model, call them uncrewed autonomous, either aerial, terrestrial, and underwater drones for use in search and rescue operations. And then the research project is developed, or components of it are developed in our 530, 550, 560, and 580 courses. And you think, well, for a tiny home community, why use drones? Aren't they expensive? Well, drones are safer, they don't become fatigued, and you can use a variety of sensors. Now that we've provided you with an overview of what systems engineering is, talked a bit about our courses and the culminating project, I hope that we've excited you to apply to our program. So for our admission requirements are, first of all, you need to have a bachelor's degree from a fully accredited institution. Well-qualified applicants will have completed coursework in computer programming, calculus, probability and statistics, as well as a capstone experience related to engineering design fundamentals. Now, for students who may not meet those qualifications, individual study plans are developed for those students. And that falls under the category of conditionally classified admission. So depending upon the type of undergraduate degree held, so we said applicants may be admitted with either a classified or conditional admission status. Under classified admission, the applicant must meet all of the program admission requirements that we discussed on the previous chart. Now, for those who have not completed coursework in computer programming, calculus, probability and statistics, as well as a capstone experience, they may be considered for conditional admission. And for those students, we would develop individual study plans that would provide them with the skills that they need to be successful in our program. Now, for international applicants, I should say, independently of their citizenship, if they have received all or portion of their education in a language other than English, they must also meet specific English language proficiency requirements. To find complete details at this link. And we also have an international student services staff, which you can call directly, you can email them, or you can get more information. You can connect with them at csudh.edu/global. Program costs. We are really proud to be able to deliver our program at a cost that's significantly less than at similar programs at other institutions. So our 33-unit master's program costs approximately $20,000. That's $527 a unit, which is about just under $1,600 for each 3-unit class for that total. Financial assistance may be available, and there's no difference in cost for local, out-of-state, or international students. You can plan to spend approximately $200 per term on books for 6 terms, and we do our best to provide lower cost materials. Now, the other fees, there's a $70 application fee and an $85 graduation fee. And again, I want to emphasize that the cost is very low in comparison to other programs. I went to graduate school at an institution that was about $2,000 per unit. So we are really pleased to be able to deliver a high quality program at such a competitive cost. Now, in terms of financial aid, there are federal student loans, unsubsidized Stafford loans, the William D. Ford Federal Direct Loan Program, CSUDH. We offer a number of scholarships. Howard C. Christensen Endowed Scholarship. There's the Robert Sprague Foundation Scholarship for STEM majors. And then also you might want to look into student loans from private organizations, Sallie Mae, as well as other loan providers. For complete details on how to apply for funding, you want to visit our link at csudh.edu/systems-engineering-ms/costs. To join us for this fall, the application filing period begins on October 1st and ends on June 1st. You must have all of your supporting documentation in by June 1st. At this point, we don't accept applications for the spring or summer terms. When you're ready to apply, visit the Cal State Apply website at www.calstate.edu/apply. If you need assistance, we have provided additional resources in the MSSE information kit, which includes a step-by-step application guide. You select the term that you're applying to, create an account, and pay the $70 application fee. Once your application has been successfully submitted, notifications from the CSUDH Office of Admissions and Records will be sent with instructions for logging into the My CSUDH portal so that you can learn to track your application status. Thank you for your interest in the program, and I hope to work with you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Tony. At this point, we've covered a great deal of information, a lot of good information regarding the program and systems engineering. But just in case we missed anything, please feel free to email us at msse@csudh.edu or check out our website at csudh.edu/MSSE. If you're ready to apply for the MS Systems Engineering program here at CSUDH, applications are accepted online through Cal State Apply at calstate.edu/apply. And if you would like to discuss any questions regarding your admission, the admission requirements, and so forth, please email us at msse@csudh.edu. This concludes the Masters in Systems Engineering program information session, and we want to thank you for joining us today. Again, feel free to connect with us on our website, on email, as well as on Facebook. Once again, thank you for joining us. Stay safe, and we look forward to working with you soon.